Hey, there's the camera. Here I am, Walter Bosley with the Walter Bosley channel and a very special early in the day Friday episode for you. And I'll jump right into it. My guest today really needs no introduction for anybody who's watched any TV or paid attention to memes on the internet. Um, David Hatcher Childress is my guest, and he is certainly most well known today for being one of the stars of History Channel's Ancient Aliens, a series that I've been on myself. Okay, so you won't get me to rag on the series like a lot of people do. I first became aware of David Hatcher Childress around 1995 when I found his book at Borders. Remember Borders? I miss Borders. I loved him. Man-Made Flying Saucers, and one of the Lost Cities and Ancient Mysteries book series. And I just loved what the guy does. And through the rest of the 90s, I continued to read his books as I found them. And by 2002, I had the good fortune to meet David. And that year, I went on not just one, but two of his guided tours through the Mayan ruins of central Mexico. I loved it so much the first time. I took the second one that same year in November. Then the following year in 2003, of the 4 months that I spent in South America that year, one of those months was on a trip with David's group, the World Explorers Club. I got my shirt right here on today. And wow, that was a trip that was very memorable. And I still tell stories about it. David and I will probably talk about it a little bit, but I have never stopped recommending going on tours with David. And that's how I became personally acquainted with David, went to his conferences over the years. You know, we've run into each other at conferences, met up, hung out, and he's just a really great guy. And I wanted you, my audience, to have the opportunity to kind of meet David Childress. So I'm going to bring him on, and we're going to talk about cool stuff that, we like to think about and talk about, and that he, for decades, has been investigating. Okay, so here we go. David, welcome to the Walter Bosley channel.
Hi, Walter. Good to see you again.
Yeah. Always good to see you, David. Always good to see you. I was telling him I have my Wex Club t-shirt on today since you're here, and I decided to go all out and my mug. Now, these items I've had now officially for 20 years.
That t-shirt looks great on you. I'm glad you got the mug and everything. Yeah, the new issue of our magazine is just coming out and being mailed. I guess you'll get one.
Excellent. Folks, World Explorer magazine. You can find it at Barnes & Noble. Better yet, go to adventuresunlimitedpress.com and subscribe to it, because I have a whole shelf of years and years of the magazine. It's fantastic.
Also, it has its own website too. adventuresunlimitedpress.com will get you there. And there's wexclub.com.
Yes.
Not sex club, but Wex Club, WEX Club. We shorten World Explorer to Wex, and we have Professor Wexler, one of our characters. We have some cartoons. It's a fun magazine, lots of mysteries, cryptozoology, lost cities, Indiana Jones stuff, some humor as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fun magazine, really.
It's great. And I have read portions of articles from it here on different streams that I've done when talking about, just the amazing places. Particularly, I'm a big fan of the subject in your book in particular, The Lost World of Cham. As you know, my readers know that I have referenced this book, I think, in 2 or 3 of my works since reading it, and we're gonna get into this today.
All right, good. Yeah, to me, that's an important book and one of my favorites. I wrote it a few years ago.
I think it's one of your most important works, because what it's about, it really fills in, gaps and answers questions, which, again, we're going to get into that. Another one that a little later on in the hour that, I can't not let my viewers, miss this is one of your recent books, Andromeda, The Secret Files About the Flying Submarines of the SS. This is fun stuff, and it's got some really interesting information. So we'll hit that a little later. So what are your recent travels that you've done?
Well, during the COVID pandemic, I didn't travel much. I couldn't go overseas, really. I did travel around the U.S. a little bit. Recently being up to Alaska, but yeah, I went to Greece in May with a World Explorers Club group, and that was fun.
Oh, great. Yeah, I miss those. It's been way too long since I've traveled, so I've got to jump back in with the WEX Club trip, hopefully.
I remember, that the couple of trips you went on, and I was just going to say, we were talking about South America and Peru and stuff, and people often ask me, what's your favorite place? And I don't have any one favorite place. In fact, I love traveling to Pacific Islands and stuff too. But I never get tired of going to Peru and South America. It's just really land of adventure and mystery, megalithic cities. It's just so incredible. And Cusco, Machu Picchu,
yes,
Ollantaytambo, all those places, Lake Titicaca, and then Tiwanaku and Pumapunku, which are in Bolivia. But I mean, all those places are so fantastic. Nazca too.
Speaking of which, Lake Titicaca. Now, for me, it's been a memorable experience. Now, again, as I say, for 20 years. But how many times have you been caught out in a storm on Lake Titicaca like we were that time?
That was a pretty harrowing incident on that trip when we got caught on that storm. We were on a small boat. That was kind of scary.
No lights, no radio.
Right. Yeah. And it was dark, we were kind of late. Getting to this port in Bolivia. Oh, the lightning and rain was pouring around us. And if you'll recall, Walter, a couple of people who were in the back of the boat, and, we were inside, although you could go outside, but it was raining.
Sure, yeah.
But there would be these lightning flashes and stuff. And people said there was something following our boat, like a submarine.
Right. I remember them saying something about that.
Yeah. People suddenly kind of came up, and I was up at the front of the boat and stuff. But they were like, hey, there's something following our boat out there. Apparently I could see it during the flashes of lightning. So I don't know if it was a UFO or USO, or perhaps maybe Bolivia has a submarine,
Yeah, you never know. And that's where what I recall about that was, I remember there were a few of us, yourself and me and a couple of the other guys, and we were just all out there casually, laughing and going, hey, a terrible storm. And I think Jennifer was the one that came out and suggested, you guys might want to come inside because that lightning is a little close. And we're oh yeah, a good idea. But we were having a good time.
We finally made it to the port, still pouring rain, and then we had a bus trip to La Paz. Yeah, that was quite the trip. I had been on an earlier trip back in the 80s, late 80s, one of my first times to Lake Titicaca, and they had to cancel the hydrofoil because there was a tornado on the lake.
Wow.
And it was also, just really severe weather. And we were supposed to cross over to Bolivia like we did at that time.
Yeah.
But they actually, they just canceled it. And we had to spend the night in the small town of Copacabana there overnight in like a little hotel, when we were supposed to be at the Sheraton in La Paz that night. But these things happen. There are some big storms out there. Lake Titicaca is so mysterious. Parts of the lake are very, very deep, like 800 deep. Other parts of the lake are more shallow. We have the island of the sun, the island of the moon, and stuff there.
Yeah, which are fantastic, folks. Seriously, you got to go on one of these trips. Since you mentioned the things that might be there that we don't know about, that kind of jumps right into, the basic theme of, our discussion today. And that is something that you have written about for decades now and are really an advocate of the study of. And that is, I guess, what we call hidden history that's kind of kept suppressed and away from us. And it seems to me that things like the Rama Empire, the expanse of the Cham Empire, fall under that. There's again that they just don't seem to want us to know what the real true history, human history is. And you're one of the main voices discussing that out there. Do you still feel that way, that there's something about history being kept from us?
Well, I do, of course. And I mean, that's such a good point. And that comes very much into the Cham, the Lost World of Cham, the Kampa, the Pacific voyages and things like that. What we're being taught in school today it's unscientific. And that is that oceans are barriers and people can't just get into a boat and go somewhere. No, they have to walk thousands of miles, through Siberia and Canada to get somewhere. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is unscientific. Oceans are not barriers. Oceans are highways. And the Polynesians, we know, and Micronesians and other people in these islands groups, I mean, they're going all over the place. Hawaii. The Hawaiian Islands are some of the most remote islands in the world. They are thousands of miles from anywhere. And yet, we know the Polynesians got there and, they have all their legends. And I believe they're part of the Cham too.
Well, Thor Heyerdahl was one of your personal heroes. And he essentially proved it to an extent that they could do it.
Exactly. And I met Thor Heyerdahl in northern Peru back in about 1990 or so. And what a great guy. I was so impressed with him. We filmed him. His interview with us is on my YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. But I asked him about Atlantis and stuff like that. And he said, he believes in Atlantis. He thought that there was that. But his main focus, was trying to prove that people, could cross oceans and go much farther and, to South America, particularly. To Easter Island, all that stuff. He famously, had these reed boats built and a balsa boat, one in Peru and stuff. And that's interesting too with reed ships, which they also use in Peru and on Lake Titicaca for that matter. Their reed ships are virtually unsinkable. And even if they break apart, every part of it will still float. Right. They also have a very shallow draft, which allows them to go over coral reefs and stuff like that much easier, particularly like atolls out in Tahiti, Tuamotus, places like that, Tonga. We have a lot of coral reefs surrounding islands and stuff. And oftentimes, what you want to do if you're a seafarer is really get your boat into a lagoon that's protected. Mm-hmm. And, one thing you've got to say for all these early seafarers, the Cham, who I believe also were the Polynesians and Micronesians and whatnot. Right. I mean, they're going out. They knew the stars. They knew navigation. Quite sophisticated. They're the ones bringing coconuts and even chickens and dogs and the sweet potato around. Mm-hmm. Bananas also is a staple for them. Mm-hmm. But to go out into this vast Pacific and all the terrible storms and all that, I mean, these guys are super adventurers and with tremendous courage. And they weren't afraid, of the ocean and getting out there and going places. And there had to be some early discovery voyages, of course, but, sure. They pretty much knew where they were going most of the time. And they were, as I say in my book, The Lost World of Cham, these guys were, they were these Hindu Buddhist Shivites who called themselves the Cham or the Kampa, and they were a mixture of different races. Some of them were, very much Caucasian, which the Polynesians are. They're coming from India, somewhere the west coast of India is what they think.
Mhm.
But others were more Micronesian and Oriental in looks. The Cham, and generally like Indonesians. The Cham also, Indonesia was all part of the Cham territories. Sumatra, all those places, Borneo, even the Philippines, the southern Philippines at least.
Right.
And then out into the Pacific. These guys, and they were also allied with Egypt somehow. And a lot of Cham stuff looks very Egyptian. The statues you see in Vietnam look very Egyptian, and they're and granite, so they need power tools to do that. Sure. If you go to My Son in Vietnam, and which was a calm city that's right there near Da Nang. And so this was right there where the war was being fought, right the border of North and South Vietnam. It's kind of central Vietnam, and that's where My Son is. And there's a fantastic museum there in Da Nang too. It's just really one of the best museums with all kinds of amazing things. And the city of My Son is more up a river. But when you're there at My Son, I mean, you're seeing basalt that's cut, perfectly cut, and you see those keystone cuts that I often talk about in my books on ancient technology in Peru and Bolivia and stuff, where you have these keystone cuts.
Right.
That are in these blocks, and they're in granite or basalt blocks and sandstone blocks too. And you see them at Pumapunku. You see them also at Tiwanaku. You see these keystone cuts at Ollantaytambo, and also at the Temple of the Sun in Cuzco. And these cuts are like T-shaped cuts or hourglass cuts, and they span 2 blocks of stone. Excuse me. And so they're cutting, they're spanning 2 blocks of stone, and they're pouring metal clamp. They're pouring molten metal in it. So you're seeing that also in Vietnam. You're seeing it at Borobudur in Java. You're seeing it in Peru and Bolivia. So I mean, and that's an unusual way of binding blocks together. You wouldn't think that people would independently, create that.
Right. And then yet you see it in all the, speaking of Pumapunku, I've told my viewers, subscribers ad nauseum, but the first time I saw Pumapunku was on that trip with you. And it was before the main group came over. You took me and Doug and I forget the young guy's name. I see his face, and you said, "Hey, I want to show you guys this next site." And that was the first time I laid eyes on Pumapunku. And it was, this was machined. This, what the heck, And it never left me, the impression.
Yeah, right. The articulation of the blocks at Pumapunku, those H blocks particularly, and there's other ones there too, where they're just, they have these like inner kind of doors that are cut in them with inside corners. Right. Very complicated. And the whole H blocks, and they kind of fit together. I mean, again, that's power tools that had to do that. And even you would need CAD programs probably where, they're automated controlled by a computer that's cutting these blocks and uniformly making them. They're going to fit together. It's the same thing, you see that's the incredible thing, is that what you see in Peru and Bolivia is what is identical to stuff you see in Indonesia and in Vietnam and in Cambodia as well, by the way, Angkor Wat.
Right.
When last time I was at Angkor Wat, about 10 years ago or so, and I had been there before, but they had just opened up a new site in the very northern mountainous area of Cambodia, right on the border with Thailand. It's called Preah Vihear, and it's on top of a mountain like Machu Picchu. And it has also one of the buildings there. It's also megalithic, perfectly fitted together, cut out of granite and basalt.
Oh, that's interesting.
All that stuff. And at Machu Picchu, one of the famous things is, if you recall, is that they call it the window of three, or the wall of three windows.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and that's a big megalithic wall. It's got three big windows. It's right near the hitching post of the sun that everyone goes to when you're in Machu Picchu. It's kind of the main thing you go to. The wall of three windows is right there, and it's megalithic and perfectly put together. Other earthquakes and settling have pulled some of the blocks apart a little bit, but at Preah Vihear in northern Cambodia is the same thing, and also a wall of three windows. I mean, I believe that Machu Picchu is a model taken from Preah Vihear, and this basically the same people are building it. Again, it shows you kind of how crazy, in my mind, modern archaeology is. It's particularly when you look at what they claim are Inca buildings in Peru.
Right.
Like at Tiwanaku and Pumapunku, and there's certain megalithic towers in that area too, like Cotimbo and Silustani and stuff.
Right.
They had, archaeologists admit that they are pre-Inca. The Incas didn't build those buildings. And that's the thing with the Incas. The Incas are very near to us. I mean, and they were only existed like 200 years before the Spanish.
You can see the distinct difference in building style and quality when you're there at these sites, right? You got the megalithic at the bottom, which is way before the Inca, and the Inca look almost hodgepodge compared to it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. But modern archaeologists are claiming that Machu Picchu and Sacsayhuaman and all these incredible walls in Cusco and at Ollantaytambo and at Pisac, I mean, there's a number of sites there, that they're all built by the Incas only like 100 years or so before the Spanish got there. I mean, even Machu Picchu, it's said to have been, made very early. So, it doesn't make sense. And you can see that there's an older megalithic structure there.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the India connection to the Cham Empire. I've recently been introduced to, not personally, the works of a gentleman named P.N. Oak. Have you ever heard of him? He's a historian of Vedic history, the Indian history. And he has some interesting, he puts forth the idea that the Hindu civilization was global. Now, of course, we know about the Aryan invasion, the ancient Aryan invasion, and so you would have to assume that that's inclusive of what he's talking about. But he talks about all these places that are associated with the Cham Empire. So, in fact, how do you pronounce it? Borobudur?
Borobudur in Java.
Borobudur, yeah. He talks about that, and I find that that in the argument that India was global, I find a lot of evidence for that in things like the Cham Empire. And it's interesting how in the West we're just supposed to ignore these ideas. We're supposed to ignore anything but that linear academic idea of history that really, I think, has mainly just been pushed since around the mid 19th century.
Yeah, we were talking about that before, whether oceans are barriers or highways and stuff. Yeah, so with Thor Heyerdahl and all that, we today we kind of put historians and archaeologists into two categories. You're either an isolationist in that, all these South America and North America and Australia, all these countries are, isolated from each other and have very little or no contact, versus diffusionists who believe that, oceans are highways. People got into boats. They crossed both the Atlantic and the Pacific, the Indian Ocean. We know, in fact, the Cham, they settled Madagascar. So, they're not just going into the Pacific and New Guinea and out into Hawaii and Tahiti and Tonga and Fiji and all that. They're going the other direction too. They're going to Africa. And apparently Madagascar was completely uninhabited island, until they got there.
Well, one
they
thing,
built megalithic structures in Madagascar too.
one place you go in Lost World of Cham, which I absolutely love, because I agree with this. When I read this in your research, I agree with it, is that the Cham Empire, that civilization, probably is the explanation for the mysterious city in the Grand Canyon.
That's right. That's what I ultimately concluded. And, that whole thing about this mysterious lost city in the Grand Canyon, or mysterious tombs, or whatever it was, these caves that are there. And I first wrote about that in my Lost Cities of North and Central America.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a chapter on that. And you have the 1909 Phoenix Gazette article, which talks about the Smithsonian going there and whatnot. And it's quite a lengthy article. And in it, they describe some of the things that are in these caverns.
Right.
And they're like rock cut tombs, like at the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, where Tutankhamun and those guys are. So what they describe is they describe it as Egyptian type statues and things, but they also talk about it as being Tibetan. So how about that? Okay. So and that's when you get that with the Cham, is that the Cham stuff looks Egyptian and it also looks Tibetan.
Yeah.
It has, and when you look at, I've been to Egypt many times, and the basalt and granite statues you see in Egypt, which are so well made, you're seeing, and the people are mainly naked or wearing a loincloth, and, you see their bare chests and everything, but they're all so well done. And that's what you see in the Cham Museum in Da Nang. And, you're looking at these guys and you're thinking, wow, it looks so Egyptian, but it also looks Tibetan. And it's in reality, I mean, these guys are Hindu Buddhists.
Right.
And that's another interesting thing that I finally figured out, having been to Easter Island and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I also spent a lot of time in Nepal as well. And I was a technical climber back in the 70s. Been to Kathmandu many times in Nepal. And what you have also in Nepal is what they call Shivites.
Right.
And that's, so back in the 70s, I was early on introduced to Shivites. Shivites are, it's a sect of Hinduism, essentially. And Buddhists can kind of be Shivites too. Because they also worship Shiva, and Shiva is one of the Hindu trinity. He's also called Shankar. He supposedly lives on Mount Kailash in Tibet, and he's often depicted as blue. But one of the important things about Shiva is that, and all Shivites, he doesn't cut his hair. He wears his hair very, very long. I mean, his hair is down to his waist. But he ties it in a top knot on the top of his head.
Right.
Okay. Like maybe we might think of Vikings also, doing stuff like that. Most normal Hindu males normally, although things have changed in the last 150 years or so, but they would normally shave their heads and leave a little tassel in the back, which is called a sika.
Okay.
And if you've ever recalled running into a Hare Krishna at an airport back in the 70s or something, right? So so that was kind of famous for us. If you've seen Hare Krishnas, they're shaving their heads, but they leave this little tassel on in the back, that called a sika. And by the way, talking about Hindus around the world, at Göbekli Tepe and at the museums there around Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. And these are cities now, they're saying go back to, 10,000 BC and stuff like that. Some of the statues they've recovered there, the men are wearing sikas. They have that little tassel, and that's very recognizable. I mean, they have a bald shaved head, but with that little sika tassel. So that also shows that the Hindus were in Turkey, they were in Greece. By the way, Nefertiti, the famous Egyptian queen, she wasn't an Egyptian. She was from Mitanni, and Mitanni was a Hindu type state in central Turkey, like where the Hittites are, and actually right around where Göbekli Tepe and stuff is. Although Göbekli Tepe was already, had been buried thousands of years before Nefertiti lived there.
Yeah, okay.
So here already we see the Hindus, they're in Central Asia, they're in Turkey and Asia Minor,
well, P&O,
and
he claims
too.
P&O claims that the global Hindus are part of the answer to the mystery of the Etruscans as well, and so that's kind of interesting.
And that's a good idea, right? I've never really addressed that, but yeah, the Etruscans are mysterious, also very, very advanced civilization. The Etruscans and megalithic in a sense. Yeah, that would make sense, and they're still trying to figure out the Etruscan language and stuff. Also, languages in Europe too. They call them, Indo-European. And Hungarian and Finnish and stuff like that. A lot of these languages, they find their roots back to Sanskrit and early, Hindu languages and stuff like that.
One of an excellent book that I enjoyed, a very short book. I had 2 copies of it because the first one I left on the airplane, which I rode in over the Hindu Kush on my way into Afghanistan on an adventure many years ago. I left it on the seat. But it was the Gene Matlock, The Last Atlantis Book You'll Ever Need to Read, or something like that. Yeah,
okay.
And he gets into all this Sanskrit words, around the world and such. But do you think, it crossed my mind actually recently, with the strong possibility that, I'm in the camp that thinks they really did find this city in the Grand Canyon. I know there's some people, we're not sure. No, I think they did. And we understand why things get suppressed. With that find, could the nature of that being inside the cliffs and inside, could that suggest that maybe the Cham or the global Hindus have had something to do with the tunnels found around the world? In your opinion,
well, sure. I've not really thought about that so much, but yeah, I can see that. And by the way, in India, there's many famous tunnels, and they always claim that there was a big tunnel from the Red Fort, which is in New Delhi, and goes to some place. So yeah, they were building tunnels. The Mayans were well known to build all kinds of underground tunnels and connections. And the Mayans too are definitely connected to these ancient Hindus and Kampa,
absolutely,
as they're the Olmecs, and also the megaliths at St. Augustine in Colombia and stuff like that. With the Mayans, what's so fascinating is that within Hindu culture and Buddhist culture and Kham culture, whatever, you have the sign language, and that's called mudras. And the way you hold your hand, your fingers, Jesus did that too,
Yeah, that's true.
Everything has a meaning. The way you hold your elbow and your wrist, and then the fingers you have up, all that has tremendous meaning.
And when the conquistadors arrived, they had this.
Yeah, right. But that was the thing. But you see, you have that with the Mayans too. And they're also, if you look at Mayan statues and stuff, they're all doing exactly the same thing. How their feet and their hands and their wrists, they're doing all those Hindu mudras and stuff. We often think of that as a Hawaiian sign language or sign language in general. That's kind of what a mudra is. And whenever you have a statue of some Hindu god or even Buddha or whatever, they will have their hands and their fingers and wrists and everything will be in certain positions. And I
remember one of the museums we went to had, I think it was when we were going around the time I think we were going to the Olmec Park, or maybe it was the museum at the park there in Villahermosa, I think. All the statuary and carvings of the myriad of features of the human figures that were carved. There were, you name it, any features you can find around the world were in this statuary that was found there in Mexico, in central Mexico, and which strongly suggests, like you said, that the oceans are highways and that all these people were visiting there. The Olmec heads that look like Africans. I mean, obviously, this it would be interesting to take a tour of the. I've not done the Yucatan. The closest I got there was when we went to Palenque on the 2 trips I went on, but I haven't gone into the Yucatan yet. And it'd be interesting to look at all the ruins to see what's similar to what you find in Asia and India. Tajín impressed that when we went to Tajín, and it got the pointed corners. I'm looking at this going, oh wow,
yeah,
that
very
like
oriental looking
right?
pyramids. There's some Mayan type pyramids in Java as well. And yeah, when it comes to the Olmecs. Well, by the way, with Tajín and those are Totonacs there, and they do that flying thing where the men, I think, didn't do it the day we were there, but yeah, they tie a rope and they fly around. They're swinging on this thing. Yeah, that is where vanilla comes from, and which is a special thing. We had an article in World Explorer a couple of issues back about how they had found vanilla residue in an ancient pod in Jerusalem. Well, and vanilla comes from basically right around Veracruz, and it's hard to make vanilla. It's it's an orchid, and it's vanilla. It's a unique orchid actually, but it's those people, the Totonacs and stuff around Tajín, who had developed that. But I was going to say about the Olmecs is that, yeah, what you were pointing out, when you go and you see the Olmecs, many of them have elongated skulls too. Many of them look like they're Africans. I mean, they look very much Negroes. Others look extremely Chinese, very Oriental. Others look like they're, from the Middle East and Caucasians with big
facial hair. And the mustaches and the beards.
American Indians don't have facial hair. Asiatics don't usually have facial hair either. It's only really blacks and Caucasians who have, facial hair and can grow a big mustache and a beard. Some Japanese and Chinese try and do it, but it's kind of tough for them. But anyway, so you have American Indians down there too. But here was my point: is that these guys with the Olmecs, they span both the Pacific and the Atlantic coast. And that's the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. And this is the narrowest part of Mexico where, you can cross from the Pacific to the Atlantic in a few days walking.
Wow. Yeah.
But, and we think too that blacks, and so many of the colossal heads that they're 20-ton, basalt colossal heads, they would need power tools to make that. Diamond, I mean, basalt is so hard and stuff. But you see those guys, and you naturally think they would be from Africa, and they may well have been. However, blacks also exist in the Pacific, and they were in Vietnam as well. And the montagnards of central Vietnam, right around Da Nang, were blacks. They hardly exist today, but you have the Melanesia. So you have the Solomon Islands, New Caledonia, New Guinea for that matter, New Ireland, all of these places, Vanuatu and whatnot. Those people are blacks, okay? And how did they get there? So here we have what are essentially remote Pacific islands in a way, east of New Guinea, and they're populated by blacks. How did they get there? Did they walk?
Sailing African? No, not walking. That's for sure.
Vanuatu or something. I mean, they're not. No one's explaining that. And in fact, with the DNA, with all this new DNA research, what happened was, and this kind of slipped under the news, sort of. But when they did all this DNA research, what they decided was that the oldest DNA and the original DNA was coming from Australia and New Guinea. And that area, it wasn't coming from Africa. So this whole idea that, we're out of Africa and that human beings came out of Africa, well, that's not what the DNA research showed. It showed that we're out of Australia and New Guinea.
Maybe Africans came from Australia.
Right. Well, I mean, right. So what the mainstream scientists then did, because we have to be out of Africa. So what they said was, yeah, okay, well, the Africans left Africa and they went to New Guinea and Australia and Vanuatu or whatever, and then they came back to Africa. And that's how, that's how they go. But they can't find the old DNA in Africa. But yeah, no one is changing. The DNA discoveries cannot change this out of Africa. And that has, I think, a lot to do also with the paleontology there, Lucy finding Olduvai Gorge, they're finding these, really
when
ancient.
You mentioned Lucy and all that, when I was working on my counterterrorism job that had me traveling around the world at, the time that I traveled with you guys too, I worked with a lady who had worked for, I think, Leakey the Sun. And I got a little insight about the difference that, they went at each other, because I guess Leakey the Elder became more of a diffusionist, I guess, or humankind is a lot older than, and his son resented it. And apparently his son really butted heads with him and was part of trying to discredit him. And I just found that real interesting.
Yeah, I've kind of heard that. I don't know that much about that, but Leakey, one of them, I think it was a father. Yeah. He very controversially came out around Death Valley, and there's a place there. I forget the name. There's a mine in that area, and like that Lake Mannix and all that. It's kind of near Barstow, and there's a mine there, and there's an old lake, and they found what they believed were the same kind of flint tools that Leakey had found in Africa. So, and Leakey, basically what he did was he went there and he looked at these tools. And this was back in the 50s or early 60s or something. Mm-hmm. And he said, yeah, these are genuinely, arrowheads and spearheads and stuff like that. They're old. And he was dating them to 100,000 years old. Right. And everyone went, wait, no, that can't be, you're a crazy nut, you old crazy old man.
And that was my understanding. Even his own son criticized.
Yeah, his own son, and everyone, they all discounted this. And simply because ancient man couldn't be that old. And they had the whole Clovis thing, and they were like, oh no, mankind wasn't in the Americas until about 12,000, years ago, or 12,000 BC or something like that. And they've now totally proven that wrong as well. I mean, they've pushed it all back to about 30,000 BC, but these artifacts that Leakey was finding, he was dating to 100,000. In the end, they just discounted it and said, no, these aren't real artifacts. They're not tools. They're just rocks, on this lake bed or around the edge of it. And that's where it stands today. Calico is that name of that town. It's called Calico.
Oh, been there many times. Walter,
yeah, you've probably been there. The mine and all that. Yeah, and they talk about it when you go there, Calico. It's a little bit east of Barstow.
Did you know? Yeah, I grew up going there when I was a kid. We used to go. Did you know? I learned this just not too long ago. That when I was writing my Disneyland book, I learned it. Walter Knott, he bought the buildings, the buildings that were still there at the time. He bought the buildings from Tombstone, Arizona, that were there in 1881 during the famous gunfight. He had them disassembled and reassembled, and they are the buildings in Calico Ghost Town.
Is that right?
Go to Calico, the actual old buildings, they're from Tombstone, and it's an interesting place, very interesting. So.
Well, all of this kind of fits in with Hindus going around the Cham, the Kampa, this stuff in the Grand Canyon. In my book on Lost World of Cham, I actually talk about them moving war elephants around. They in the salmon ruins in northern New Mexico, near Aztec, New Mexico, and Salmon, Farmington. I actually grew up in that area, in the Colorado area. And they found these tablets in 1910 or something there, and they have elephants on them. They're clearly elephants are inscribed on these tablets. And what archaeologists, well, they're like, well, that, again, how can that be? Some
Right.
try to explain it as well. They were looking at mammoths, and that somehow mammoths had still survived, or they had seen mammoths. But yeah, as I write in my Lost World of Kong book, yeah, I mean, apparently they actually brought elephants across the
Right.
Pacific. The Cham were doing that, and war elephants were a big deal, and that was, they had them.
Well, there's the statuary in Copa or in Honduras,
Copan,
right?
in Copan. Yeah, that's right. There was
Copan,
and he's on, and elephants, war elephants, and just working elephants in general. They have a person sitting right behind their head, and that's called a mahout. Yeah, in Hindu, and that's what you have at Copan in Honduras, this Mayan site, where this guy is, he's sitting behind this elephant head, and and it's got a trunk and everything. The way archaeologists have tried to explain that is that it's a stylized parrot, with a really curvy beak instead of a trunk. And now there's a guy sitting behind, the head of this parrot.
What's up with that? It's Western academia. It's full of trust me, bro. I'm the specialist. Don't ignore the facts behind the curtain. Just listen to what we're telling you.
Well, and I mean, that's the thing, is that, museums around the world have all kinds of amazing stuff in them. But archaeologists kind of just ignore it, and they put a little plaque and they just say, oh, this, or they'll say, we don't even know what this is. As another example, you were talking about Mexico and all that. Was one of the last trips we did down there was right before the pandemic, was to Monte Alban and Mitla and that area.
Those are great sites.
And you were there at Monte Alban and stuff too. And there's a small museum there. I don't know if you noticed it at the time, but I've taken more notice since I've been there a few times. There's a plaque that has Ganesh on it, the Hindu god, elephant god. He's Ganesh. I mean, he's sitting there.
There you go.
Snakes are coming up. Yeah, and he's got a trunk and everything. And I looked at it and I thought, that's Ganesh. And it's right. It's in the museum right there. And of course, I took a photo of it.
Well, yeah, and what more do you need? But of course, people are just gonna. I need more. I'm like, okay. You bring up. I'm glad you brought up museums and things in museums. Let's talk about that issue with the Smithsonian and how they are known to suppress these things. Well, you had an interesting experience. You've had interesting experiences with them when trying to get info about these things, right?
Well, yeah. When you contact the Smithsonian, and if you talk to any rangers at the Grand Canyon, for that matter, they don't know anything about any of this stuff. They don't. They've never heard of this. The 1909 Phoenix Gazette article is very specific, and it talks about a Smithsonian archaeologist named Jordan. It names a number of people, including a guy named Kincaid, who's like a prospector and stuff like that. But in the article, they're saying that this Jordan, he's a professor, he's from the Smithsonian, and that he's sending all these artifacts back to Washington, D.C. And I had some people try and go through some Smithsonian archives and stuff, and they claimed that there was a Jordan who worked for the Smithsonian, and that they found him. It was also claimed at one point that they took a bunch of these artifacts out on a barge into the Atlantic and dumped them. Along those lines, well, and here we go. We'll talk Indiana Jones for a minute. That whole final scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where it's all over, and the last thing Indiana Jones says is, he says, "Well, where is the Ark right now? I want to see it." And they say to him, it's the last line in the whole movie. They say, "Oh, don't worry. Top men are working on it."
Yeah.
And then the last scene is you're seeing the Ark of the Covenant being, in a crate, being put in this giant warehouse where nobody's ever going to see it. Right. And that is, the allegations against the Smithsonian, really. A similar thing like that, which I wrote about extensively in my Lost Cities of North and Central America, is these Lovelock Caves in Nevada. And they found there are 2 museums in Nevada that are about these caves, one in Lovelock and one in Winnemucca. And the story is there that these red-haired giants were there, and these lakes have dried up, but they used to be these big lakes, and these red-haired giants were hunting ducks and stuff like that. And they were cannibals according to the Paiute Indians and stuff like that. These are their own legends. Mm-hmm. And then around 1910, these ranchers began digging out the Lovelock caves there because of bat guano. There was many feet of bat guano in these caves, and what they found were mummies and people. They were there. I mean, they found people, in the bat guano, and they had red hair, and they were like 7 feet tall or even taller, and they brought a bunch of them out of this cave, including duck decoys and these woven shoes out of mats that were also really big. I mean, these guys had huge feet. They were literal giants. Mm-hmm. But when you talk to them at the museums, and the museums show some of the artifacts and duck decoys and the footwear and other things like that, but they don't have any of these skeletons or skulls. And I said, well, where are they? What happened to them? And their story is what they tell you. They say, the University of Berkeley in California came, and they took all of this stuff, and they took the mummies, the giants and everything, and they took them back to Berkeley. And we know it existed. And in fact, they even told me that there was a photo they had all seen of a rancher standing on a crate, holding up by the hair one of these mummies, because he was so tall. And you can see, and you could compare him with this rancher who's probably 6 feet tall. So this, he's holding up like an 8 foot tall, mummy or something.
Wow.
But get this, even that photo has disappeared.
Of course.
And they could have found that photo, but they all kind of they all remembered it. So all this stuff, disappeared. When I did, one episode of Ancient Aliens, and they sent me there, and they did it in the episode. They took me behind, inside the museum. This was not on display. This was in Lovelock. And what was there, they had a skull with a jaw in this cabinet, and they brought it out, and they allowed us to film it, and we looked at it. And the camera crew and the producers had given me a small jaw from a dentist, like a plaster of Paris thing of a normal person's jaw.
Right.
And so I had that with me, and I could put it up next to this jaw of this skull they had there. And this guy's jaw was twice the size of a normal person. I mean, it was obvious that this guy was huge and his whole face, all his, facial structure was gigantic. So here again, you have to wonder why aren't these things on display? Why didn't the University of Berkeley put, have they hidden them too, like the Smithsonian?
Yeah. Do they still have it? That's the question.
Yeah. Do they still have it? Did they destroy it? We don't know. People often ask me, why would they do that? I mean, why would Smithsonian cover up these things? Or, what if we had, giants, if we've discovered giant skeletons, well, why would they cover that up? Why don't they put it on display? Everybody would be so curious. Well, here's the answer. Back in the, late 1800s, mid 1800s or whatever, with science coming on and evolution and you have a lot of very religious people, and, everything they know is, it's in the Bible, and the Bible is the word of God, and everything in the Bible is true. And the Bible talks about, Methuselah lived 900 years, and there's giants, there's giants in the Bible, and there's all kinds of weird shit in the Bible, and so, and it's all true, right? Noah's Ark and everything, Ark of the Covenant, all the, every bizarre thing you can think of, it's in the Bible. And they wanted to discount that. So they didn't want people believing in giants and stuff. They wanted people to be kind of, shall we say, rational and scientific or something. Yeah. So yeah, they you know, they did, it's kind of like pyramids and stuff too. You have huge pyramids in Illinois and in Wisconsin, and you have the Hoax Lands. They're giant pyramids. They're earthen pyramids, but they won't call them pyramids. They call them mounds. And when I was there one time, I said, well, you know, why don't you call these pyramids? They're pyramids. And he's like, well, no, yeah, we call them mounds, you know, because what are you going to do? You're going to say, you know, you're Mr. Tourist. You're going to say, oh, is this pyramid? Is this like the pyramids in Mexico? Is this like the pyramids in Egypt? Right. Oh, no, nothing. No, there's no, you know, there's no.
This was a mound.
Well, yeah, no, we don't have any pyramids here. Pyramids are in Mexico. Pyramids are in South America. They're in Egypt. They're not here in the United States. No, I mean, it's the same thing with the giants, you know, like, well, what about, didn't they find some giant skeleton of some 8-foot guy, you know, in a mound in Ohio or something? Oh, no.
Yeah, it's the denial in the face of, you know, continued emerging facts. But speaking of pyramids that are denied, and in one of your books, Lost Cities and Ancient Mysteries of, I think, Asia and Central Asia and all that, you talked about kind of getting for the time, it was an unusual thing, but you got a visa to do some traveling in deeper into mainland China, right? Or something along those lines. And I can't remember, were you able to go see that giant pyramid there or get close to it? Or
right, those are the pyramids near Xi'an. Yeah. Right. And that's where the terracotta warriors are and stuff too.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So China did a kind of a similar thing where, yeah, there are huge pyramids in the center of China, like Cahokia Mounds. So you have earthen pyramids that are packed earth,
right?
And then you have, you know, pyramids that are built out of stone, like the Egyptian pyramids or Mayan pyramids. The Teotihuacan pyramid is, you know, basically a megalithic structure. Yeah. And we don't know who built Teotihuacan, by the way.
Right.
Mainstream
big
mystery. No, we don't know who did this. They have no idea. I maintain the Olmecs basically built the, you know,
which could tie in then to the Hindus.
Into the Cam and all that stuff, right? And Monte Alban is where I was talking about the Ganesh statue. That's all part of it.
Right.
As well. So China too, they kind of wanted to deny that they had pyramids. You know, it's kind of like, oh no. Bruce Cathy out of New Zealand, he wrote to the Chinese embassy in Auckland and stuff because he had that photo. He wanted to find out where it was, and he was going to calculate it on his world grid stuff that he would do. He's passed away now, but yeah, the Chinese embassy, they told him, oh no, we don't have any pyramids in China. You know,
nothing to see here. Move along, folks.
Yeah, but they do. I mean, they have giant pyramids, and there's a number of them, and they're largely off limits. Although you can go see those terracotta warriors and stuff like that. Look, I was also one time. I was at Comacalco. You were there too, because that's near Tajín and we went there. Well, they used to have these weird displays at Comacalco of Mayan and Olmec heads, and some of these guys, they were weird, you know, and they had like strange cranial deformations and stuff.
Oh,
and they had and they had a big placard too of some of these statues and ceramics and stuff, and it was weird. You know, I took a couple of pictures of it because I was just like, wow, who are these guys? Well, when I went to that museum a couple of years later, that was not on display, and I noticed it. You know, I was like, well, where was that plaque with all this weird stuff? So you have museums literally removing things, particularly some of these elongated heads and weird heads because of ancient aliens, I think, where people are going to museums. In Malta, they did that too, where they have these elongated skulls and stuff like that. And like Malta. In Nevada, but they won't put them on display. I mean, you know, their photos and stuff, we know that they know they're there, but they don't want to put them in their museum. And because people look at them and go, whoa, who are these weirdos? You know, are they?
This doesn't match what we're taught in school.
Yeah.
Well, we're down to, go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish that.
Well, I was just going to say one last thing, maybe before we wrap up here and stuff, is I did want to go on about the Shivites and that whole thing about the Sika and your hair and how you tie your hair up in this top knot. That's what the Shivites do. Okay. Right. They don't shave their heads. They tie their hair up on a big top knot. They have a lot of hair. And that's what you see on Easter Islands.
Yes.
Those guys have the top knots on their heads of the hair. So they are Shivites. Those statues on Easter Islands are statues of Shiva. That's what I finally figured out. They're statues of Shiva. And basically, I think a bunch of Shivites and these guys, they were using Easter Island as a major, like a naval base of a sort. But it got so isolated that, at some point they kind of got marooned there, because that is a very isolated island. And, so what they did was they had bananas and fish and, sweet potatoes and stuff to eat.
Right.
Maybe dogs and chickens even, because a lot of Polynesians had that. But yeah, I mean, they didn't have anything else to do. So they started carving all these giant statues and stuff and putting them up. Most of the statues were never erected, really. But yeah, those statues, they're depictions of Shiva. That's what I believe.
That makes sense, complete sense to me. These things, you look at it, you see the evidence that's out there, and still some people want to, in the face of the evidence of what is obvious, they still just want to reject it and complicate things. And it's just what we're up against, when we're trying to dig out, the real history. Do you have 10 or 15 minutes to take questions from the live chat? Or do you got to go? That's cool.
Well, I could take one or two. I did want to maybe say one last thing.
Do it.
And just this Hindus around the world thing, which I totally agree with. California. The name of California is a mystery. And one Hindu scholar also, he claimed that, the name for California is coming from the Hindu goddess Kali. And that's where the name of California is coming from. It's Kali, California, or whatever. They don't really know where the name California came from.
Right.
If you read history books, they try to say, well, there was a Spanish legend or something about a black pirate queen, and her name was Kali or Khalifa. So you had Caliph, which is kind of that to be like an Arab type name, to be a caliph or something. But they don't know where the name California came from. Right. And so that's interesting too, that's also perhaps a Hindu name. They don't really know where the name Peru came from either. And that's another kind of mystery. So you have the name of Brazil comes apparently from Irish legends, and this High Brazil, which was this legendary island in the Atlantic, and they called it High Brazil. And then when the Portuguese discovered Brazil, they named it after this legendary island. Yeah, High Brazil.
I took a pretty deep dive into what we're talking about right now regarding California and its the ancient mysteries. I took a deep dive into that in my book, Secret Missions 5, Veiled Destinies. And boy, you're right. It's fascinating, the mystery of California. There were things, I'm a native here and I've been interested in this stuff, and there was a whole bunch of new stuff to me as well. And so,
how about this, Walter? You have that lake filling up again, Tulare Lake, there by Fresno, and it's because of all those rains and snow over the winter. That lake, which had completely pretty much dried up, is back. Right.
Wow.
And that's what has gone on in California has been drying up for thousands of years. There used to be all these lakes there and inland seas and all this stuff, but they've been drying up. And Tulare Lake, I think some of the farmland around there, kind of destroyed what was left of that lake. But even Death Valley too, as was some big giant lake, Lake Mannix and stuff, Lake Lahontan and all that, and how geologists want to say, oh, that was millions of years ago or something. But yeah, the evidence is there that, even just a few thousand years ago, that lake.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Absolutely. When you really look at it, that's what you find. That's the history and the evidence that you find. So I'll tell you what, we'll take 3 questions from the live chat, but first I have a question. I think it's New Guinea. Is it still as dangerous to go out at night on New Guinea because of the cannibals?
It's still, New Guinea's an incredibly dangerous place. You can't go out at night. You'll probably be killed. There's really no nightlife there, or bars or restaurants to go to. During the day, there's some of the few big hotels will have a bar and a restaurant, but you wouldn't ever leave the hotel at night. Yeah, it's just so incredibly dangerous. When you go into some of the highland places, it's, I think, less dangerous than where the towns are, because the towns have these gangs that roam, and it's just incredibly dangerous there. And if you live, the expats who live there, a lot of New Zealanders and Australians and British and others, they're all armed too. And yeah, I mean, you keep a gun under your pillow. You hire you have night watchmen and guards, guarding your place, because it'll be broken into.
Still dangerous in the 21st century. The world is still adventurous.
Mexico is said to be the second most dangerous country in the world, actually. I think Iraq was thought of as the most dangerous country.
Wow.
But Mexico is way up there as really super dangerous, and a lot of it has to do with kidnappings and the murders and stuff that happens in Mexico. I mean, there's a lot of that violence isn't usually directed against tourists and foreigners, but it can be, anyways,
we have a question from Chud Boria. David, do you study anthropology?
Well, sure. History and archaeology, anthropology, paleontology, all those things are interesting to me. But I don't have a degree in any of those subjects. And I don't, I'm a researcher and a historian and whatnot. So, I have a wide variety of interests, as you know, Walter, and also into biology and, zoology and all kinds of things.
Let me throw a question at you. Have you been back to the tunnel in St. Thomas of the Letters? I can never pronounce that right.
St. Thomas of the Letters. No, I haven't been back there. No, I'd like to go back there. And there's a tunnel there too.
And you've been in it to an extent.
Yeah, I've been in it. Yeah, and it's like 8-10 feet tall. You don't have to duck down or anything. You walk through it. Eventually, what stops you is there's certain drop-offs that can be about 10 feet or 8 or 10 feet. And if you don't have like a little ladder or rope or something with you, then it makes it difficult to continue.
Wait a minute. What's this? Matt Armitage asks, what's the latest with the Caracas skulls? Are you familiar with the Caracas skulls? Venezuelan, I guess. I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, I'm not. I think he might be confusing Paracas.
Okay.
Paracas. Yeah, Paracas is there. That's near Ica and on the way to Nazca, and that has a lot of those unusual skulls. And they were featured in Ancient Aliens a couple of times. Brian Forster actually lives in that area. There's a private museum, but there's a couple of other provincial museums there. So what's near to Paracas is also the town of Ica, and that has a really good museum, and they put these unusual skulls on display there. I mean, in Paracas, in Peru, fortunately, they do put these skulls on display. In other places, they tend to take them out of display, but in Peru, you are going to see them. And Paracas would definitely be a place to see those.
Of course. Well, hey, you know what? I think we've taken enough of your time. I know you're a busy guy. You got stuff to do. Is there anything coming up? Any events you got coming up that you'd like to tell everyone about?
Well, I'm going to be in McAllen, Texas, in a week or so for a UFO conference, and then I'll be in Las Vegas for this one I guess it's in November with Jimmy Church, the DJ out of Los Angeles and stuff. Right. And I would just like to say, our new issue of our magazine, World Explorer, it's coming out. It comes out 3 times a year. It's single issues like $9 on our website, or you can join the club, as we say.
It's well worth it.
And that's folks. It's like $30 a year, and you get fun stuff from us, stickers and other things, and we send out free DVDs.
I've been published in there twice.
So
I got a couple of articles. So.
And a couple of articles for us. Yeah, we could use another one. It's a fun magazine, and if you like, listening to Walter and watching Ancient Aliens, I think it's a magazine for you. So check it out at wexclub.com or adventuresunlimitedpress.com, and that's where you'll see all our books and my many Lost Cities books and all that. So I
definitely I recommend the Lost Cities and Ancient Mysteries series, guys. You got to read those. So
well, it's been great. It's been fun being on your show, Walter. I've had a great time.
Well, I appreciate it. I really do. Thank you so much for taking the time and they giving them a chance to get to know you. And we got to do this again sometime.
Okay.
So we will do that. So David, have a good weekend and thank you again. Okay, guys. Well, I'll tell you, that was just fantastic. Let me there we go. Okay, I think I got all that. All righty. So hey, I'll tell you, I always enjoy talking with David, and I appreciate all you guys being here. We had just a fantastic turnout today, and David and I could go on. I'll tell you, I could go on listening to David for hours. I have before. He's a really interesting guy. I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to see David outside of the Ancient Aliens context, because I know that's how most people are familiar with him. He's written about and talked about and researched and traveled to much more than just that context. And this is truly an excellent work of scholarship as well. And yeah, David goes in places where to places where in his work and what he does that some people don't want to venture to. The hypotheses and these ideas of human history being a lot older than we're taught. You kind of have to you got to cross your own Rubicon with that kind of stuff, right? You have to decide for yourself what you accept about history, what convinces you, and if you're just going to go with status quo, mainstream, what the experts and specialists tell you, because hey, trust them, bro, they are the specialists and the experts. And what David was talking about a lot was some of this the changes in science and such that began with the 1830 shift in the Royal Society. You've heard me talk about it before. And you heard him say that in the mid 1800s, when all that started to shift and change, don't pay attention to lore, just listen to the hard bean counting materialist science. You guys know how I feel about that. So I will take questions for a while if you guys have any. Anything that maybe you still had questions, after we mentioned something or talked about it. Remember, put your questions and comments in all caps. If you are talking to me and want me to see them, I see some not aimed at me, so I'm guessing that's conversation going on in the live chat. But again, yeah, this is a great turnout, folks. The live chat is we got a really, really good number today. So I am seriously going to shift the time of the live stream coming up soon. Okay. And I will make sure that it's well announced. Let's see. We got Matt Armitage. He didn't want to talk much about the Paracas skulls. They have done DNA tests on them. I know the results. He should. Well, if you'll notice, Matt, it was towards the end of our time, so we really didn't have time to get into it. I'll ask him what he thinks, what he knows about it. But what are the DNA results? Just in a sentence. Martin Taylor says, Michael Cremo's another superb researcher on these ancient civilizations. Yes, I agree. I'm a fan of Cremo. Rogue Status asked, I don't know if this was already answered. Apologies. When and where did you guys first meet? I actually first met David when I went on the first of the Mexico trips with the Wex Club that I went with him in 2002. I called World Explorers Club and David answered the phone. And I said, hey, my name's Walter. I want to sign up for the Mexico trip. And so that's when we first met. I was on the Mexico trip in February of 2002. And I liked it so much that I signed up for the one that November of that same year. And I see CW is in here with us. Hello, CW. Let's see. Brian Evans says, Walter, I watched your post about UFOs and it reminds me of the Welsh sighting. Oh, okay, cool. TSC says, having the stream early is great. Well, thank you. I kind of like this too. CW Channer says Michael Cremo is a joke. Okay. Everything's a joke, though. We can make everything a joke, right, CW? Wait a minute. Half your opinion. Hare Krishna's apologies. We're going to stick with this same time for upcoming. I like this. You know what? I agree with Malia on this when she first suggested it this time. And so we figured we'd give this time zone, this time frame slot, I guess is the word, a chance. And yeah, I think we are going to stick with this. This works well. Jamie Griffin asked, did you work out what the lifting fluid was in the Aero Club's images? Not enough to say publicly yet, but I've been pulling some threads on that, and there's been some interesting stuff emerge. Philip Blair asks, are you familiar with the experiment where an object was made to levitate with magnets, but the Royal Society scientists were led to believe it was an experiment on levitating through chanting? That's interesting. I'm vaguely familiar with that, and maybe, is that in Lawrence Gardner's book? He wrote about the levitation. Philip Blair continues, the levitating object was caught on video, but the Royal Society scientists say they saw no levitation until after they were informed of the magnets. Yeah, well, you know, when you're talking the materialist bean counting type of specialist scientist, okay, for a very long time, of course, they've taken that tack, because you have to understand these kind of personalities, they don't want to be bold. Okay. They don't want to question the status quo. They certainly don't want to question their colleagues or their peers or, you know, their superiors, because, you know, a lot of them, they're looking for they want a steady flow of the grants. They're looking for reputation among their colleagues. And particularly if they're looking for tenure as a professor, that kind of position. And then once they get that, they don't want to lose that. And so then, you know, essentially careerism outweighs the scientific pursuit of truth. So, you know, they would rather not be bold. They stay safe. And so that doesn't surprise me that, you know, the flip-floppy, you know, 1 minute it's no, we didn't see that. And then when it seems like there is an acceptable reason for the levitation, oh yes, well, we saw that. And it's, there you go. It says what you need to know about the character of careerism. You know, you experience that in a lot of walks of life. In the military, we had it too among the officer corps. There were the mission-oriented guys, and then there were the careerists. Philip Blair says, expectation bias made a fool of the Royal Society scientists. Anytime you could make a fool of those materialist guys, you know, that's fun. That's fun. Wait a minute. What's this? I missed something that... Did I miss something that Matt said? Okay. Let me see. Next time, I'm going to have David back because I wanted to ask him. Years ago, we had a conversation. in which I asked him, "Hey, have you learned anything that was really just the kicker, the thing that just blows your mind that you haven't talked about?" And he indicated that, yeah, there was. And it was something that the way he expressed it was something he could not talk about. You know, the implication was he was told, he didn't specify by whom, was that he was not allowed to talk about it. I think it was, if I recall, it was something that he was shown, and it was, you know, what we who are interested in this stuff would consider pretty wild. And again, that goes back to, when I say we who are interested in this stuff, that goes back to, you know, you reach a point where, you know, you kind of are faced with your own Rubicon to cross. And what does that mean? It means you no longer give a shit what other people and naysayers, you know, to get a laugh in a public forum, you know, or to feel good and be applauded by, you know, their echo chamber. You know, in spite of those guys doing that kind of stuff, you just have to reach a point where you say, you know what, I just have a different view than those guys do, and I'm going to proceed with that, on that path, and see what more I learn. The same thing, I've tried to say the same thing in the UFO world. You know, stop paying attention to these stupid hearings. Stop paying attention to the alleged whistleblowers that you've thrown our way, okay? This is all smoke and mirrors, dog and pony distraction. Go out and do a deep dive and field research, and not just field research, but a search, an expedition looking for the answer on UFOs, and keep it private, say for 5 years. Don't go public. See how many people can resist that temptation, right? And I think it'll be interesting what you find. And part of what would make it interesting is, in my opinion, that it would not resonate with the popular path that ufology, you know, follows and insists that you follow too. But you know, the same thing with history and all these mysterious, you know, secrets about the lost cities and such. Just you know, go your own way on this stuff for a while. And you know what? If you personally come to ultimately the conclusion that the trust me bro mainstream academicians are right, then there you go. But at least you've gone out on your own independently to determine for yourself. My money is on, you'll find that they're full of a brand of shit that either they don't know that it's a brand of shit, or they're you know, what's the word for it? Shilling for somebody who doesn't want it out there. You know, yeah, you guys have heard me talk about it. The night on Lake Titicaca, it was one of the most beautiful days weather-wise that I'd ever seen in my life. Absolutely clear. I've got photos of how clear, not a wisp of a cloud anywhere, not even the suggestion of a cloud. And that storm that rolled in, I mean, it rolled in within 15 minutes. We went from beautiful, sunny, clear blue skies to black storm clouds. And again, you guys have heard me talk about that at other times, and it was just astonishing. And I remember the people saying they saw something under the water. I didn't see it myself, but you know, a couple of the other folks said they did. So you know, AOS, when am I on Forum Borealis? Oh, I've got to he had to reschedule me. Something came up on his end, and I've got to go in actually and put myself on the calendar. And I've got an email from him asking me to do that. So I do need to jump on that. Here we go. Philip Blair says, I wish the UFO curious would look into the history more. Yes, I wasn't able to convince Mick West of the value of Dr. James E. McDonald's work. West only interested in the latest. Yeah, that's the problem too with a lot of ufology, is they are only interested in the latest stuff. Hey, while I got you all here, I want to remind you, go to the link at walterbosley.com to get your tickets for NIMSACon. Seshari, Olaf Phillips, and myself will be lecturers there in person. We've got Joseph Farrell speaking. He'll be speaking remotely via a stream link. And we have a fifth speaker that will also be likely speaking remotely. And that's the lecture day. It's a 3-day event in October, Friday the 13th through the 15th. Okay. And the Friday night is the meet and greet gathering where we all get to hang out and get to know each other. Saturday is the day of fantastic information presented in really fascinating lectures at the Best Western in Sonora, California, home of the Sonora Aero Club. And then Sunday, Seshari and Olaf Phillips and I and Malia Grimm will take you on a tour of the stomping grounds of the Sonora Aero Club, Old Sonora, Old Jamestown, and historic Columbia. You'll also see where Charles Delshow said that they would fly their flying machines, the arrows. Okay, and you'll see other places where Delshow indicated that they flew. So if you're interested in the Sonora Aero Club and all those mysteries, the airship mystery and stuff like that, you're not going to want to miss this event. And I'll tell you what, we're keeping it really affordable. Okay, for $45, you get to participate in those events of all 3 days. Okay, this isn't one of those conferences that's going to cost you hundreds of dollars just to be there. Okay, you get yourself there, you feed yourself and lodge yourself, and for a mere $45, you can hang out with us on Friday. You get to attend the lectures and you get to go on the tour. And you know what? Seshari is going to be talking about his handprint of Atlas research, the telluric current, and how that ties in to the missing 411 cases in Yosemite. You see, the Gold Country, Tuolumne County, Sonora, Columbia, Jamestown, and all of that, that's adjacent to Yosemite National Park. Okay. And if you recall, there's the disappearances in Yosemite National Park. Well, Seshari years ago did an analysis, a geomorphology analysis, and he identified the telluric currents and the intersections of telluric currents. Okay. And they match where the missing persons incidents have happened and been reported. Okay. He'll be talking about that and more mysteries of the Sonora area and how that ties in with how possibly the Aero Club made their things fly. Okay. Olaf Phillips will be giving a great presentation. I'll be giving, and we're all presenting fresh material. Okay. We're not going to just present stale stuff we've talked about 1,000 times before. We're all committed to presenting fresh material. Joseph Farrell has told me that he's got something really interesting to present. You guys aren't going to want to miss this, and you can't beat the price, $45. So go to walterbosley.com and go into the shop, and you'll see the link for NIMSICON. And there's going to be more details posted, okay, and more info posted in the coming week. So check that out. Check that out. I think you guys will enjoy it. I know I'll enjoy seeing however many of you can attend. Maybe we'll get something started with this. The NIMSICON in October. Okay. And Brian Evans says Michelle Gibson has some very interesting research on the energy lines. Okay. Michelle Gibson. That's a name we'll have to look at. Okay. So. Okay, folks. You know what? It's been an hour and a half. I want to thank all of you in the live chat. We had a huge turnout. I hope you guys enjoyed, getting to know David in a context other than Ancient Aliens. Please go check out his books. Check out The Lost World of Cham, definitely. And you know what? I didn't get to ask him yet, but this has got some interesting information. Andromeda, the secret files, the flying submarines of the SS. You guys know that what I do is I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't agree with all of the things presented. And I got to tell you something. I've known David for 20 years and I've read his works. Neither does he. What David Childress does is he presents you with what's out there, with what's claimed. Okay. And he really does let you, the reader, decide for yourself. All right. He really does. And that's why I'm a big advocate of, pick up a David Childress book and read it, and you'll see that he really, he lets the reader decide. So there's a lot of good information in David's books. Go get the magazine at wexclub.com and Adventures Unlimited Press. Get the magazine, seriously. I think if you don't subscribe, you'll run to the bookstore every 3 months when the new issues come out. I have a whole shelf of them. Malia can tell you, I have this colossal collection, over the years, almost every issue. And I'll tell you, if you got the travel bug and you're interested in this stuff, there is no better tour guide out there that I've traveled with than David. David runs a very inclusive operation. He really knows his stuff, the sites you go to, and you get the interesting additional information and theories and hypotheses. And he's been doing this, folks, since the 70s, going to these mysterious sites and stuff. This has been a lifetime for him. He's real. It's just real fun to travel with the Wex Club. It's a good crowd of folks. You'll make lifelong friends, trust me. So, okay, again, folks, thank you very much for the turnout and the live chat. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and please go check out David's links. Go check out walterbosley.com and lostcontinentlibrary.com, and the live stream will be back Wednesday with Joseph Farrell. Yay. Again, the return of Joseph Farrell and the cosmic warfare, trans-temporal cosmic warfare discussion returns Wednesday night. And there might be something popping up on Tuesday that I'm working on with a couple other guys named Joshua Cutchin and Tim Banal. And it's looking like that's going to happen Tuesday. I'll post the announcement for that over the weekend as soon as it's finalized. So again, you guys have a good night and have a good weekend, and I'll see you soon.